My wife Iris sat on the couch next to me, holding the bowl of popcorn in her thin hands. On her other side, our little boy Freddie sat. He looked just like his mother, with the same dirty blonde hair and faraway eyes, like the eyes of a dreamer. The movie played across our flat-screen TV, some CGI comedy, with talking penguins and llamas that could drive cars. It was some garbage from Disney I would never have watched in a million years, but Freddie liked it, so I suffered through it for him. We had turned off all the lights in the house for the movie. Only the TV's flickering colors illuminated the room, sending dancing shadows that flashed out behind us. Suddenly, outside the living room window, a bolt of lightning came down from the sky, splitting a tree in our front yard in two. Light flooded in through the window as if the flash of a nuclear missile were ripping its way across the town. A crash rang out as the tree split down the middle, its massive branches tumbling down onto the lawn. I jumped as the ground shook. More lightning flashed nearby, hitting other houses and lawns on the street. "Damn, there wasn't supposed to be any storms," I said in surprise. The TV had gone black, and now we sat in darkness. For a long moment I thought the power had gone out. Abruptly, it came back on with a roar of white noise and a flickering of static. The volume seemed to be increasing by itself, growing into a rushing cacophony, like a waterfall. I saw Iris try to scream something, but I could only see her lips move. As suddenly as it all started, it stopped. The standard "Please Stand By" screen, with a rainbow of blocky colors behind it, appeared. There was a clanging, ringing sound that emanated from the speakers, high-pitched and whining like tinnitus. Then text started appearing across the screen. At the same time, a deep, serious voice spoke in the background, like a radio announcer reporting on the death of a president. "This is the Demon Emergency Alert Broadcast System," the voice read grimly. "This is not a test. Level 5 activity has been reported in your area. Do not go outside. Close all blinds, shutters and windows. Lock all doors and close any attached garages. Do not open your doors except to military or police personnel with the proper insignia. Even if someone appears to be in distress, do not open your door to investigate or try to interfere in any way. A temporary quarantine is in effect for your area. Military and police assistance is on the way. To ensure the greatest chances of survival during this time of crisis, please abide by the following rules. 1. If blood begins to pour under your door, go to a higher floor immediately. Avoid physical contact with the blood at all costs. 2. All legitimate military and police personnel will have a special insignia on their helmets and jackets, an eye contained in a double-thumbed fist. Only accompany them if they have this insignia. Otherwise, they are imposters. 3. Avoid mirrors for the duration of the emergency. The voice cut out abruptly, slowing down in a mechanical whine. Static started flashing across the TV, covering the "Please Stand By" message that had returned in blocky letters. At that moment, the lights went out. They came back on a couple seconds later, brightening and dimming, before the power failed again. This time, the electricity did not come back on. "What the fuck?" Iris whispered next to me, taking out her phone and shining the light across the dark living room. "That was pretty weird. Everything looks different outside too. I was just outside an hour ago and the moon didn't look anything like that," she pointed. I got up, realizing she was right. The nighttime sky outside looked strange. I looked out the front window, seeing the moon was cast in a fluorescent orange light. The cloudless sky had a dark red glow to it, as if some kind of eerie smog had covered everything. I had seen similar things happen after massive forest fires in the past. "What happened, Dad?" Freddie asked in his small voice. "Where's the movie?" "I think we lost power, little man," I said, ruffling his hair in a nonchalant manner. I didn't really believe the emergency broadcast after all. I figured some teenager had hacked the TV station and decided to play a prank. Or perhaps some disgruntled employee had done it on his last day as a kind of "fuck you" to the station. I had heard of similar things happening before. It was somewhat strange how the power had gone out, and the sky had changed, but I felt sure that it could all be logically explained. Someone shrieked outside. I looked out onto the dark street, seeing the silhouette of someone running frantically down the middle of the street, zigzagging wildly. As the figure got closer, I realized it was a young woman. She looked like she was in her mid-20s. She wore a white shirt and khakis. Her clothes were soaked in streams of blood that made the fabric cling to her trembling body. I saw a vicious gash bitten into her left shoulder, a wound so deep that the white bone peeked out through the ragged patches of flesh. "Help me!" she wailed, her eyes wild and panicked. "Why won't anyone help me?" She staggered and fell forward, crying and bleeding all over the road. I was about to run outside to see what was wrong with the young woman when I saw another silhouette creeping up behind her. It looked like the body of a man, but something was wrong. As he drew closer, I caught a glimpse of the man's face through the dim light. The left side of it was rotted and decayed, while the right looked muscular and healthy. He wore a black suit that looked like little more than tatters. Pieces of it fell off in ragged strips. I could see his left hand was also decomposing. Whatever kind of sickness it was, it seemed to extend to the whole left side of his body. The stiff skeletal leg cracked as he dragged it behind him, silently drawing nearer to the young woman. The living side of his face split into an insane, rictus grin as he looked down at her. He carried a blood-stained axe that dragged on the pavement behind him, with a harsh, metallic groan. "Get away from me!" the woman screamed at the abomination, trying to kick at him. But she looked weakened from blood loss, and her attempts were feeble and slow. The man laughed, a sound that rang out like the gurgling of blood. He spat squirming maggots from his mouth onto the dark street below. He knelt down before the gasping woman and gave a low whisper. It carried on the dead, silent air. "So warm," he murmured, wiping his dead, putrefying fingers across the streams of blood that spurted from her left shoulder. He stuck an inhumanly long, pointed tongue out of his chattering lips and began to lick the blood off his hands. But not enough, not nearly enough. He stuck the bony, decaying fingers of his left hand into the wound and started pulling at the ragged wound. Blood bubbled out in increasing quantities, covering her body in its wet sheen. The woman jerked, her face turning pale and bloodless. She tried to kick at him, but he only laughed again, gurgling like a man with a slit throat. In horror, I watched him raise the axe above his head. It stood there for a long moment, trembling in his shaking hands like a guillotine blade. "Please don't," the woman pleaded, as he grinned down at her. In a blur, he swung the axe down into her forehead. There was a wet cracking of bone and a ringing of metal. She sat there with her mouth open for what felt like a very long moment. Then, limply, she collapsed to the pavement. A dull thud echoed down the street as her skull smacked the pavement. Sickened, I closed the blinds on the window and turned away, realizing that Freddie and Iris had been standing right behind me the entire time, watching the horrific display. Freddie was crying quietly into his hands, while Iris looked pale, her green eyes wide and unbelieving. The woman exhaled one last time, a long, drawn-out death gasp, and then everything went silent. I felt sick and weak. Staggering, I put my hand out against the wall. A wave of nausea rose up my stomach. I ran towards the bathroom, shining the light from my cell phone to light the way. Iris started crying. I heard her frantically try to dial 911, over and over again. "Damn it! Nothing's working," she cried. I stumbled into the bathroom and threw up all the popcorn and soda I had consumed that night into the toilet. Covered in sweat, I started wiping my face with toilet paper. I pushed myself up, glancing into the mirror. A cadaverous version of myself stood there, the dead face showing horror and surprise, just like my own. I saw the same high cheekbones, the same shaved head, but in the mirror image, maggots writhed and squirmed in the rancid flesh. I backpedaled into the wall, stuttering something incomprehensible. The reflected image did the same, his lipless mouth opening and closing with silent curses. He wore the same clothes as myself, a black t-shirt and blue jeans, but they were rotted and tattered, as if they had been dug out of a grave. "What the fuck?" I swore, raising my right hand experimentally. The mirror image did the same, matching every single movement perfectly. At that moment, Iris came running into the bathroom, her soft footsteps thudding gently against the marble floor. I jumped, turning to her. "There's someone outside the door," she whispered, her face pale. I glanced back at the reflection, seeing that the other version was no longer following my movements. "Watch out!" I cried, but it was too late. The skull-like face came forward in a blur. His arm shot out towards Iris. The surface of the mirror swirled as if it were made of water when his pale flesh made contact with it. The sharp points of bone of his fingers wrapped around Iris's neck. Stunned and silent, I watched in horror as he started dragging her into that other world. "Stop him!" she screamed. "God, make him stop!" I ran forward, grabbing her legs as her head and chest were sucked through. There was a slight popping sound when her body entered the liquid-like surface. I tried to hold on with all of my strength, but whatever abomination was on the other side was strong, stronger than me. His iron grip yanked her out of my hands. "Dad?" Freddie asked, slinking into the bathroom. His eyes were wide and wild. He looked around confused. "Where's Mum? Who's screaming?" I had to make a decision instantly, I knew. I could either stay with my son or try to get my wife back. I knew I couldn't just leave Iris, though. I felt mentally torn. I looked between him and the mirror, my heart quivering with anxiety. "Freddie, go wait in the living room," I said. "Hide behind the couch. Don't answer the door or say anything to anyone, no matter what. I'll be right back." I wasn't sure if I would or not. Before I turned to the mirror, I patted his head. "Remember the rules they read us on the TV?" He nodded, but he was only a 7-year-old boy. How much did he really understand? Hell, how much did I even understand? I hadn't followed the rules, and now Iris was kidnapped. I turned back to the mirror, seeing that I had no reflection now. There was no sign of Iris, or the rotted corpse with my face either. Slowly I walked forward, putting my trembling hand out towards its silvery surface. My fingers went through the mirror as if it were mere air, but I felt something freezing cold ripple around my skin. Pins and needles rushed up my arm. Taking a deep breath in, I pushed myself up on the counter and went all the way through. I fell forward onto the marble surface of the bathroom floor, putting my hands out to break the fall. As I glanced up, I realized how strange everything looked. The world here was in constant motion, as if a fog-like void shimmered over the world. The floor's surface danced with whirls of shadow. They felt as freezing cold as liquid nitrogen as they passed over my body. Shivering and hugging myself, I pushed myself up off the floor. The walls and ceilings, too, rippled in the same black currents. I glanced around, seeing the white bathtub filled to the brim with dark blood. It bubbled constantly, as if someone were drowning under its surface. Bloody handprints of all sizes smeared the sides of the tub. The smell of copper grew strong, mixing with the strange smell that emanated from the shadows, a pungent chemical odor like ammonia. I passed by the mirror, seeing that here too I had no reflection. I felt like a vampire, staring into that blank emptiness. Feeling sick and disoriented, I stumbled forward, afraid to even breathe too loudly. I heard Iris crying and shrieking somewhere nearby. "No," she wailed. "Please stop." Her voice seemed to be growing fainter and weaker, as if she were being dragged away by a tsunami. I peeked around the corner. Everything looked like nightmarish and strange. The living room looked much longer, stretching out for hundreds of feet. It had the same blue carpet and white walls as the one in my world, but now it was the size of a football stadium. The dark red couch had lengthened to an absurd size, stretching wide enough to fit 100 people in it. The TV loomed across the room like the screen of a movie theater. It flickered constantly, showing a cacophony of white noise and static, interspersed with horrible images. Naked corpses with their throats sliced from ear to ear, burning bodies, people falling to their deaths from burning buildings. But none of that was what made an involuntary gasp of horror rise up my throat. It was the enormous spiderweb spanning the length of the ceiling, fluttering softly in the breeze. In the center of the symmetrical web, I saw Iris, covered in silky thread up to her neck. She was hanging horizontally, facing down, her body parallel to the floor. She struggled against the webbing that bound her like steel chains. Her eyes bulged from her head as she stared fixedly at the cadaver approaching her. Crawling upside down towards Iris was the monstrous image of myself I had seen in the mirror, but he had transformed into something spidery and eldritch. He skittered along with 4 arms and 4 legs now, the emaciated limbs poked out of his tattered rags of clothes, forked and elongated, the skin pale and covered in purple sores and deep gashes. Iris continued to plead and shriek in horror as it drew near. The creature's chattering fangs and blackened gums approached her neck. At the penultimate moment, Iris saw me, peeking around the corner of the bathroom. I stood there, unsure of what to do. I thought of trying to scream out, to throw something at the creature, but then what? We would both die. And then who would be left alive to protect Freddy? I didn't know what to do. These thoughts passed through my head in the space of a single moment as we stared at each other. Her eyes shone with a moment of clarity, even as waves of mortal terror shook her body like a hurricane. "Save Freddy!" she screamed. "Run! Go, Jack!" The creature noticed her, staring at me instantly. He curved his long neck and twisted his spidery limbs, clutching the thick strands of silk with his skeletal limbs. The creature turned to me. He had a face like a skull. His filmy eyes regarded me intently. Silver streams of saliva dripped from his mouth. He gave a wide, insane smile, then turned back to Iris, unhinging his jaw. The pale, dead skin tore with a wet, ripping sound. The yellow, sharp points of teeth gleamed darkly in the currents of rippling shadow. I turned, sprinting back into the darkness of the bathroom as the crunching of bone and the shrieking of my wife followed me out. I had to repress an urge to vomit. With all of the speed I could muster, I staggered forward to the counter, where the mirror sat revealing the image of my house, an image that still lacked my reflection inside. Iris's pleas and screams rapidly weakened. I heard her choking and gasping. A few moments later I heard a rapid skittering of many legs approaching the bathroom. I started to pull myself up on the counter to escape this hellish mirror world. Something creaked in the doorway behind me. I glanced back in fright, seeing the abomination with the 8 limbs creeping up behind me. He stood only a few feet away from me now, as my eyes met his white, dead ones. His cadaverous face split into a sickly grin. A wave of adrenaline shook my body. My vision turned white in the darkness. With a pounding heart, I pushed myself up and lunged through the mirror. The 8-limbed abomination with my rotting face gave an insane shriek. I felt a freezing cold hand wrap around my ankle and begin to drag me back. "No!" I shrieked, trying to kick blindly at the mirror creature's dead face. "I'll never go with you. Never!" I smashed my sneaker into his jaw. There was a shattering sound, as if a ceramic vase had been dropped. The chattering of sharp teeth and the shrieking cut off abruptly. Looking back, I saw the corpse's broken jaw hanging on by only a few shreds of tendons and muscle. The eyes went slack, and I felt the grip loosen for the briefest moment. I pushed myself forward and slid through the mirror. The freezing cold, pins and needles sensation returned, running over my body like water. I collapsed headfirst onto the sink, rolling onto the floor with a jarring thud. The shrieking of the 8-limbed corpse continued behind me. I saw him trying to force his elongated body through the mirror. The long arms with their sharp fingers reached through, swiping wildly at the air. Before I could escape, one of them came through and cut 4 deep gashes into my chest. My shirt instantly became soaked in blood as a burning pain ran up my body. I heard someone pounding at the front door, but in the panic of the moment, I could barely think. As the rest of the cadaverous body tried to push his way through the mirror, I dragged myself out of the bathroom. I slammed the door shut, even as the sounds of breaking and shattering followed me out of the bathroom. Ignoring the pain radiating through my body, I ran over to the couch and began shoving it towards the door. The door shuddered in its frame. The house and the floor shook as the corpse threw his enormous body into the wood over and over again. Cracks spider webbed down the front of it, and I knew it wouldn't last more than a couple more seconds. "Freddy!" I screamed, looking around frantically. My heart dropped when I remembered I had told him to hide behind the couch. He was not here, not anywhere in the living room. "Freddy, where the hell are you?" "Dad," a voice responded from outside. It sounded like Freddy's voice, but it was eerie, as if his voice had gotten caught between stations on the radio. It sputtered with static. It fell and rose in an ear-splitting scream. "Dad, let me in. Please, they're going to hurt me." I ran to the front door, looking outside, but I saw no sign of Freddy. The sky had changed, though. The moon had changed from orange to a dark red, the color of a burst blood blister. The rest of the sky was such a dark shade of crimson that it looked almost black. Around my feet, I felt something warm and wet. "Where are you?" I yelled. "I don't see—" At that moment, the bathroom door exploded outwards in a shower of nails and splinters, covering my face and body in the debris. The cadaverous face peeked around the corner, as if he were playing hide-and-seek rather than hunting and killing people. "Fuck!" I swore as I looked down. Seeing blood streaming in from under the door, it covered my sneakers up to the tops of the soles as more and more flooded in. I ran for the stairs as the 8-limbed corpse skittered across the ceiling like a spider. He hung upside down, the jaw hanging askew on his putrefying skull, the filmy eyes flashing with bloodlust. I was already halfway up the stairs when the corpse jumped down into the lake of blood at the bottom of the stairs. With his elongated, twisted limbs, he began pulling himself towards the first step in a blur, covering his body in the thick, putrid blood that continuously poured in through the bottom of every door. But something was in the blood, I saw to my horror. I froze in place near the top of the stairs, watching the creature as he struggled to pull himself out of the blood, which was already at knee height and still rising. There were dark silhouettes slithering through the blood. I saw the head of a black snake peer out at the 8-limbed cadaver. The snake had no eyelids, and its eyes looked as red as the blood it lived in. It wrapped its muscular body around his torso, rising up towards the cadaver's face. The blood-red eyes met those dead, rotted ones of the corpse as they stared at each other. Then the eldritch snake lunged forward and bit off the corpse's face. Other snakes started to rise out of the surface, wrapping around his forelegs and slithering up his back. The corpse wailed like a banshee, running blindly into the walls to try to smash the many snakes that suffocated and bit him from all sides. But this only seemed to heighten their hunger and bloodlust. The sound of shredding flesh and snapping bone followed me as I ran into Freddy's room and hid. His room was the only one without mirrors in it, I knew, and I wouldn't be making that mistake again. In the thick curtains of shadow, a small voice rang out, terrified and searching. "Dad, is that really you?" Freddy asked, hiding behind his chest of toys. I saw his small body, contorted and pale, his little head poked above the lid. "Freddy, you're alive!" I cried, running over and hugging him. Tears streamed down my face. "I thought you were outside. I heard you screaming out there. I heard you and Mom yelling outside too," Freddy whispered, his small body trembling as I held him. "I got scared and ran up here. I'm sorry, Dad. Where's Mom?" "It's okay. Thank God you did," I murmured, remembering the lake of blood downstairs and all those strange black snakes. "Mom isn't coming, Freddy." He went silent then and didn't ask any more questions. A sick, heavy weight covered my heart. In the darkness, we hid and waited, though I knew not for what. The smell of copper and iron from all the blood downstairs had become overwhelming. After a few minutes of this, I took my phone out and shone it around experimentally. I saw a thin layer of blood streaming into the room, rising up the stairs like the waves of a tsunami. It covered the hallway's hardwood floor, a half-inch thick, deep already and growing fast. Dark shapes slithered and writhed in it. Small waves pushed the lake of blood towards us, and within seconds my shoes were submerged in it. "Dad?" Freddy asked in a panicked voice. "What's that?" "There's things inside of it." Without thinking, I picked Freddy up and held him above my body. "We need to get to the attic," I whispered to him, sprinting through the rising pool of blood, with my son in my arms. "Don't be afraid, Freddy. We'll make it." I had nearly reached the hallway, where the pull cord for the attic stairs hung, when something wrapped around my feet. I went flying forwards, dropping Freddy in the pool of blood. He was submerged up to his waist instantly. His small body writhed in terror. "Help me! Help me!" he screamed, flailing his arms as black snakes circled him like hungry sharks. The one wrapping around my legs continued slithering up my body. A rising sense of horror and panic filled me. At that moment I knew I was doomed. I only hoped I would see Iris again. Then I noticed spotlights turn on outside, filling the inside of the house with a radiance like the sun. All of the windows upstairs suddenly smashed inwards. A spotlight shone through the nearest of them, illuminating me and Freddy in our frantic struggles against the snakes. Men in SWAT gear crawled through the shattered windows. With their gas masks, their faces looked like insects with too many compound eyes. On their helmets and jackets, I saw a strange symbol, a double-fisted thumb holding a staring, lidless eye. Dozens of them streamed in, shooting the snakes that circled Freddy and me. As the one wrapping around its body slowly wound its way towards my face, one of the black-clad men came up behind it and shot it in the skull. The snake's body collapsed all around me, its muscles loosening in death. With relief washing over me, I ran to our saviors. "Get us out of here," I pleaded. "There's horrible things happening." The man nodded in his black, military gear, his mask revealing nothing. "Follow me," he said dispassionately, starting towards the roof. "You two are the only survivors we've found so far. It truly is a miracle anyone's still alive." I could only agree silently. "This must be all over every news channel," I said. The masked man shook his head. "No one knows about this," he responded. "No one but you two and our group. The media won't say shit. They do what we tell them." I followed the men out onto the roof. Helicopters crisscrossed the skies, illuminating the houses and streets with many bright spotlights. As a helicopter slowly lowered itself down to take Freddy and me away from that pit of nightmares, dropping a rope for us to ascend. I glanced around my town one last time. Many of the houses were destroyed or burning, sending thick clouds of black smoke into the blood-red sky. Men in full SWAT gear zoomed around the blood, flooding the streets in boats, the whirring of the motors echoing like angry hornets. Turning away, I followed Freddy into the helicopter and never returned. Iris is dead, and Freddy and I have seen enough horrors to scar us for 1,000 years. In my heart, I know it is my fault my wife died. I didn't follow the rules, and she paid the price. I will hear those dying, panicked screams until my final breath. I've been working as a truck driver for well over 10 years now, but I only recently changed companies. I actually would have stayed in my own company, but when my friend Jake told me how much his company paid, I practically begged him to get me a job there. He referred me there, and I got the job after a quick interview. The interview itself was very strange, because I was asked some questions I didn't expect, like, "Have you ever abandoned your vehicle on the road? Are you afraid of the dark? Are you religious?" etc. I answered everything truthfully and got hired right on the spot, so I didn't think twice about the oddity of the questions. My job was to transport dried meat products to a small town, and for some reason, the company said it could only be done at night, and that I had to be there by morning. I'm used to night shifts, and the handsome pay more than compensated for it, so I didn't complain. When the time came for my first tour, Jake explained which route I should take to get to my destination, stating the GPS was off a little. Before I entered the truck, he sent a message to my phone and told me to listen to it when I get on the road, since it explains some basic rules I should follow. I thanked him and started driving. When I got on the old road which Jake told me to take, I opened the message he sent me and realized it was an audio recording from him. Here's what it said. "Hey Paul, welcome to the company. Now I know you're an experienced truck driver, but our company has a list of rules you need to strictly follow while you're driving. I'm going to lay them out for you here, and you make sure to follow them as best you can. I'll also send you a text message so you can read the rules in case you aren't sure. Now, first of all, make sure to turn on your high beams and keep them on at all times, since it's really dark on the road. You may notice that even with the lights on, it's really dark, but don't let that concern you. Within the first 10 miles, you may see a dead-end sign ahead. Ignore it and just keep driving. If your lights start flickering by this point, speed up and drive as fast as you can until the flickering stops. You may see an old man hitchhiking by the road at this point. Make sure to stop your vehicle and ask him where he's going. If he says to the nearest town, let him in. If he says anything else, floor it and don't look back. If you do let him in, he will remain quiet for about an hour while you're driving, and then he'll ask you to stop and let him out, despite being in the middle of nowhere. Do what he says, but once he's out, don't look at him while he's walking into the night. You should be well within the 20th mile by now. If you start to hear any banging or growling noises coming from the back of the truck, ignore them. They'll go away faster if you maintain a consistent driving speed, so try to do that. Before you reach the 30th mile, make sure to turn off your radio if it was on until now. Turning it down will not work, so make sure to turn it off. This is really important. By the 35th mile, your radio will suddenly turn on and will be at highest volume. Now it's really important that you pay attention here. If a song plays, any song, simply turn it down or off. But if you only hear static, stop your truck right away. Turn off the engine, lie down on the seat and close your eyes. Try to be as still as possible and keep your eyes closed. You'll hear tapping on the windshield and roof, but you'll be okay as long as you keep your eyes closed. Even if you hear the truck door opening, don't move. Whatever opens them will close them in a few seconds after sniffing around. Once the noises around the truck stop, you can open your eyes slowly and look at your driver's window. If the window is fogged up, wait 1 more minute. Otherwise, you can sit back up and continue driving. By the 50th mile, you'll start to see something running along your truck on all fours on the side of the road. No matter how fast you go, it will always keep up with your truck. But it's advised you maintain a speed of at least 60 miles per hour. Try to keep your eyes on the road because there's a curve, after which the creature will be gone. If the creature is still following you after the curve, speed up and hope you lose it by the next curve. You only have 3 curves, so make them count. By the 70th mile, your truck will sputter to a halt. Remain as calm as you can and try restarting the engine as fast as you can. Don't look in the rear-view mirror at the figures running towards your truck. Just start the engine, and as soon as you do, floor it. You'll notice by mile 80 that it's getting really hot inside the truck. Don't bother with the air condition because it won't work. Try taking off your jacket, but don't open the window under any circumstances. Try not to fall asleep either, because even though the road goes straight, you may find yourself swerving off a cliff if you close your eyes. If you need to use the bathroom, only do it between the 85th and 90th mile, and make sure to keep your high beams on while you're doing it. Do not step off the road or out of the light. When you're done taking a leak, you may see someone move behind your truck just as you turn around. No, don't try following them, because you'll just endlessly move around the truck just in time for them to always get behind the next corner, and they want you to stay outside as long as possible. If you hear a high-pitched scream in the distance while you're taking a leak, run back to the truck and floor it. I don't care if you piss your pants, but do not waste a second running back. Regardless of the mileage, at around 3 a.m., your phone will start ringing. Don't answer it, no matter who it is, even me. The caller will try to get you to answer 3 times before sending you a message. Don't open the message either. Again, whoever it's from, ignore it. By the 100th mile, you may see a pair of beams from other vehicles in the distance moving towards you. If you do, turn off your lights immediately and wait for the other truck to pass by. Once it does, you may turn your lights back on. Repeat for any other oncoming vehicles. Do not honk or do anything to attract their attention. Keep looking in the rear-view mirror, and if you see the beams of the truck turning around and coming back towards you, drive away as fast as you can and pray you are faster. Now, when you reach the 120th mile, you'll see a sign for a 20 miles per hour speed limit. Slow down to 20 miles per hour and do not go over that speed, since the sound can attract unwanted attention. You can speed up once you see another sign that tells you the speed limit stops at that point. At around mile 130, you may see a woman waving and asking for your help. Do not slow down and try not to even look at her. Once she's behind you, look in the rear-view mirror. If she's still on the road, you're safe. If she's gone, just look straight and don't even think about looking at the passenger seat, no matter what you see with your peripheral vision. Once you reach 140th mile, you're safe. From here, it's a straight shot to your destination, Don't try to turn your truck around at any point while you're on the road, because you'll end up driving until you're out of gas, and if that happens, you're as good as dead. Don't use your GPS until you reach the town either, because it will take you to an old dirt road which will have you driving in a loop. Once you reach the client's place, the employees will take care of the rest. Let me know if you have any questions." I listened to the message and laughed, thinking Jake simply wants to prank me. That was before my lights started flickering. The rolling mountains and densely packed forests of southwest Montana are truly a place where a person could feel alone, second only to the isolation I experienced in Alaska during my Army days, excluding Yellowstone and Big Sky. This region is sparsely populated, but in the best kind of way. I hadn't had a vacation in at least 3 years, a real one. I hadn't been counting the weekend trips to Spokane, or Coeur d'Alene or Helena. The Montana Highway Patrol had stationed me in Missoula 3 years ago, right out of field training. I enjoyed Missoula. It kept me busy enough, but I was ready for a break. The schedules finally aligned, and I had enough seniority to take off 14 straight days. During my time in Missoula, I had been able to explore Glacier National Park, as well as Flathead and Kootenai National Forest fairly well. So I set my sights on Yellowstone. I hadn't been back to the area since I was kid, 10 years old or so. A family vacation or something. I didn't remember much of it. I had some campsites reserved inside the park itself, but also some in the surrounding Gallatin National Forest. I figured I'd save the money on hotels and just tent instead, since I was saving up to buy a house. I packed all my camping supplies into my truck, as well as my faithful canine companion, Tango. Tango was a 3-year-old Siberian husky, smart as a whip, and with more energy than a nuclear reactor. He was a good companion and the best boy. After about a 6-hour drive, we arrived at the first campground, near Earthquake Lake. I went to my reserved campsite and found that it was occupied. I went and talked with the elderly couple that were the hosts for the campground. They apologized profusely, as some glitch in their reservation system had double-booked the campsite, and I just was too late. There were no other sites in the campground available either. They offered me a full refund and a voucher for a free stay at another campground just down the road. They were positive this campground would have open sites for the next 3 nights. I thought it was a bit of a long shot, since it was peak tourist season. All campsites were booked everywhere. I took the refund and the voucher, figuring I would at least check the place out before I drove to Big Sky to pay $300 per night at a hotel. Howling Woods Campground was the name. It was about a 10-minute drive from the previous site, nestled in dense lodgepole pines, far off the main highway. The campground was quite beautiful. There was a small river along the southern end of the campground, with a sheer mountain face on the opposite bank. The forest around it was thick and hard to see through. The towering lodgepoles were packed together as densely as I had ever seen them. I'd never heard of this place before. I hadn't come up in any of my Google searches when I was planning my trip months ago. As I was driving into the camp, I first noticed a permanently EM-placed RV right at the center. Sitting out front was a sign that read, "Welcome to Howling Woods. Please knock. Hosts always on duty." I got out of my truck and followed the sign's instructions. After hearing some shuffling, an extremely elderly woman opened the door. She had skin tanned by a lifetime of working in the sun, and her once jet black hair had more grey in it than black. She squinted at me through weary brown eyes and offered me a toothless smile. I explained my situation and showed her the voucher. "Oh, of course. Go ahead and pick out a spot and then come back and check in. I'll get some pamphlets for you." Her accent was Native American. I got back in my truck and found a decent spot. The site was clear and flat, with enough trees between the other sites that I could have some privacy. It was also close to the bathroom and dumpster. A fire ring and a bear box sat in the middle of the small clearing, with a small picnic table just off-center. The site was on the outer edge of the loop, so that the back of the site faced the open wilderness. I parked the truck and slapped on Tango's leash. We took a long, lazy walk back to the host while I scoped out the other campers. From what I could tell, the campground was about 3/4 full, an oddity for this time of year. The sites on both sides of me were occupied, one by a friendly middle-aged couple with Utah plates on their RV, and 3 Maltese ankle-biters running circles around it. They waved at me and I chatted with them for a bit. They told me this was their second honeymoon, after all 8 of their children had finally moved out. The other site was temporarily home to a couple of 20-something guys who didn't look up from their bong when I passed them. The strong, skunky smell made me a bit sick as I passed. When I got back to the host, she had me fill out a simple sign in sheet with my site number, name and license plate. Then she handed me a small pamphlet about local hiking trails, a flyer about bear safety, and a small handwritten note. Intrigued, I opened up the note. In practice cursive script it said, "Campground rules, please extinguish all fires at dusk. Do not leave your tent or camper after dark. If you must leave your tent or camper after dark, do not use any light source. Move quickly and quietly. If you are walking at night and hear something behind you, do not run. Do not look back. Just ignore it. Do not make any loud noises after dark. If you hear anything moving outside of your tent or camper at night, do not look at it. Stay in your shelter. Howls, barks, grunts, and snorts are just local wildlife and nothing to worry about. Earplugs are provided by the host free of charge. Do not leave any pets outside at night. Lock all doors on your vehicles and campers. Lock your tents if possible. Padlocks can be bought from host. Do not leave the established trails or roads for any reason. Do not ever talk about what you see or hear in this campground." "Odd set of rules," I commented. She looked up at me, a flash of anger across her old brown eyes, her wrinkled brow furrowed. Faster than I thought possible, she lashed out and wrapped her bony fingers around my first. "Follow them. They are important," was the only explanation she offered. There was a seriousness in her eyes I had never seen before in anyone. Then she released her vice grip on my wrist. "Okay, definitely. So why is it called the Howling Woods? I've never heard of this place. The wildlife in this forest make a lot of noise at night. It is quite a spectacle, but it is very important never to interact with them. You'll scare them off, or worse," she explained. I thanked her for her help and set off back to my campsite, shoving the papers in a back pocket. I returned to the campsite, pitched the tent, loaded all the food into the bear box, and started a small fire. I drank a couple Budweisers and roasted some hot dogs over the open flames. I popped open a book and read a few chapters and drank a few more beers. Dusk snuck up on me pretty fast. I cleaned up the mess and took out my phone to check the weather. I had no cell service, but that certainly wasn't a surprise in this country. I took the beer cans to the nearest dumpster and did my business at the vault toilet. It was just getting dark as I got back to my tent. I chained up Tango while I got the tent ready, turning on my electric lantern. While I was laying out the sleeping bag, Tango barked. Tango, like most huskies, had a personality. He had quirks like a human does. He was a talker and would often howl and talk back to me in that strange husky noise, but he only ever barked when he was scared. I jumped almost through the top of the tent. I grabbed a can of bear spray and a flashlight from my nearby pack and tore out the front flap of the tent. Tango was cowering under the picnic table, visibly shaking. I'd never seen this before. I shined the flashlight around the clearing and saw nothing. Beyond the cone of light, the woods were dark. The lodgepoles scattered the beam, making it hard to see anything beyond the clearing. I coaxed him out from under the table and ushered him inside the tent. His tail was between his legs and he was shaking. A year ago, Tango and I were about 6 miles deep on a backcountry trail in the Kootenai National Forest. We turned a corner on the trail and came face to face with a grizzly. Tango nearly pulled me face first into the dirt in an attempt to run at the bear, utterly fearless and completely oblivious to the size of the bear. Seeing him react in such a way now made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. But I forced myself to think nothing more of it, though. I figured the bear had just caught him by surprise and had run off when it heard me coming. I turned off the lantern and settled into my sleeping bag, still a bit unnerved. However, the beers and exhaustion eventually aided sleep in coming fast enough. I wasn't sure how long I had been asleep. When Tango barked again, I sat straight up. Every hair on his body was pulled straight up, and his eyes were transfixed on the front flap of the tent. Still come out of my deep sleep state, it took me a second to hear it. The sound of the front flap on the tent being unzipped. In the dark, I could barely make out the zipper moving slowly. Gun, or bear spray, flashlight? The options raced through a groggy brain. I reached for my duffel bag and drew out my Glock 20 from its holster. I always kept it with me out in the wilderness as a last resort for bear defense. I flicked on the weapon, mounted light, and shouted, "Stop what you are doing, or you will be shot." The zipper stopped moving. I could just vaguely see the silhouette of what looked like a large person crouched on the opposite side of the flap. Tango began to growl this time, posturing for a fight. Then suddenly the silhouette was gone. I could hear something large tear off into the dense brush behind the tent. I barreled out of the flap, gun in hand and Tango right on my heels. I shined the light around the clearing, again seeing nothing. Tango stood transfixed and staring at a certain point out in the dark woods. His hackles were still raised and a low growl emerged from his throat. What the fuck? The chilly wind and frosty mountain air drove me back into the tent quickly. I set my gun back in the pack. My hands were shaking. "What the fuck was that?" I asked Tango. He started at me, his blue eyes offering no answers. The rest of the night I laid in my sleeping bag. Sleep would not come to me this time, the adrenaline refusing to leave my system. To make things worse, the howling started. A chorus of bone-chilling howls rose through the night air. They didn't sound like wolf or coyote. I'd never heard anything like it, in all the nights I'd spent in the mountains. It went on for hours, making sleep impossible. The howls started far off, but eventually, it sounded like the sources had moved into the campground. I could hear them coming from different directions, some close to my tent, some far away. One that sounded like it was right behind my tent, loud, almost ear-splitting. A ghostly, mournful howl. I gripped my pistol tight, waiting for something to happen. But then it just stopped. It all stopped. Eventually, the light of day began to show through the walls of the tent. I prodded Tango awake, telling him that if I was awake, he had to be too. I pulled on some warm clothes and exited the tent. Sitting at my picnic table was the elderly woman that hosted the campground. I jumped back, reaching towards my right hip for a gun that wasn't there out of reflex. In a calm, soft tone, she said, "You broke the rules." "What?" "You broke the rules. You had your dog out past dark. You used a lantern past dark. You were out of your tent past dark. You didn't lock your tent." "Yeah, so?" "Those rules are there for a reason, to keep you from attracting Unwanted attention. Attention from what? The creatures of the woods. Something tried to open my tent. No animal can do that. Would you like to buy a padlock? I sighed. Yeah, sure. She reached into her purse and tossed one to me. $5. I fished through the tent until I found my wallet and handed over a $5 bill. Follow the rules, she stated, one more time, befitting getting up and walking away. I stood there for a bit, pondering what the last 8 hours had entailed. Tango whined at his food bowl and snapped me back into the real world. I took out my griddle and made some eggs and bacon. Tango looked at his bowl of kibble and then at me with his sad eyes. I broke down and scooped some of eggs into his bowl. The marijuana enthusiasts at the next site over were talking about the howls one last night, stating that they were hella freaking sketchy, bro. I nodded in agreement to myself. I cleaned up camp and changed into some hiking clothes. I loaded up the dog and the day pack into the truck and went off to find some hiking trails. Exhausted after a day of about 15 miles of hiking, I collapsed into my camp chair. I had about 2 hours before dusk, rattled from the night's previous events. I figured I would strictly hold myself to the rules for the rest of my stay. I had considered leaving, but the campground was gorgeous and free. A hotel nearby would cost $600 or more for a 2-night stay. I figured if I followed these rules like the host said, I would be fine. Camp was cleaned and the tent was arranged long before the sunset. Tango and I were bedded down and comfy cozy when dark came. I looped the padlock through the holes in the zippers of the tent flap and locked it. My Glock was sat directly next my sleeping bag, along with a spare mag. I read a few chapters in my book while Tango started snoozing. The howling started around 10 p.m., a cacophony of strange howls, almost moans. 12 full minutes of this. I almost enjoyed them, listening as they get closer, hearing them move around the camp. Wolves or coyotes, I assumed. Nothing else could make a noise like that. Tango didn't even seem too perturbed by them tonight. Once they stopped, I snuggled deeper into my bag, ready for sleep. A light rain came down. I could hear it splatter off the rainfly on the tent. And then came the worst feeling that could possibly come. I got a fucking piss. I should have known better. I should have brought an empty bottle into the tent or something. I never thought of it. I looked at Tango, sprawled out and snoring. Am I really going to do this? I asked Tango. He snored in response. I pulled on a hoodie and slipped on my slides, pausing. I dig around for the list and double-checked. No light, got it. The bathroom was 100 or so yards away if I walked the road. I figured that was the safer option without light. I contemplated taking my gun, but I had no way to carry it. The waistband of my sweatpants wouldn't keep it in place. I opted for the bear spray and shoved it in my pocket. Tango didn't even wake up as I slipped out of the tent. I took the padlock off and then relocated the tent from the outside, making sure nothing would bother my buddy. I struggled with leaving him alone in the tent, but the rules said no pets out after dark. I made my way easily enough to the vault toilet and did my business. As I was leaving, the dew-covered dirt handle slipped and the door loudly slammed shut. Shit! I whispered under my breath. Broke another rule. I started my walk back to my tent. I could hear something moving in the dense forest beside me. Ignore it. I kept walking. Then it stopped as soon as it had began. Or at least I thought it did. After a few steps, I noticed I could hear soft footsteps behind me, but only when I stepped. My heart started pounding. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. A chill ran down my spine. Ignore it. It seemed like it was timing its own steps to match mine. It purposely was making sure I didn't know it was there. It's stalking me. Ignore it. Follow the rules. Every fiber of my being told me to run. I knew it wouldn't do me much good to run in these slides. I gripped the bear spray tight in my hand. Its steps were getting louder. It was gaining on me. I finally reached the tent. I knelt down to unlock the padlock, fumbling in the dark. I could feel it behind me. My hands were shaking. It was taking forever to enter the combination. It exhaled. I could feel its hot breath on the back of my neck. Ignore it. Finally, the lock popped open. I unzipped the flap, just enough for mine to squeeze in, and shut it quickly behind me. I dove for the gun and quickly pointed it at where I thought it was. Careful not to turn on the light. Silence. I reached forward and put the lock back in, struggling to do so with one hand, while the other hand held the gun out in front of me. The lock snapped shut. Silence. Movement. Walking. It was walking away, trudging through the undergrowth away from the tent, in the pitch black. I didn't see Tango walk up and lick my face. Good boy. Back to sleep. He obeyed, circling his spot 3 times and collapsing once more. I took a few minutes for the shaking to stop, and then a few more minutes for me to put the gun back down. Sleep came slowly, not fast enough. I could hear the door of the camper next door open. The Mormons. Well, I guess I assumed they were Mormons. They were letting their dogs out by the sound of it. Bad idea. The dogs yipped and yapped, even wandering over to my sight. I could hear one panting and sniffing a few yards from my tent. The panting and sniffing became barking and growling. The barking and growling turned to yelping and whimpering. Tango shot straight up, eyes fixed at the point in the tent wall where the sound was coming through. I dived at him, wrapping my hand around his snout to keep him from making any noise. Shh, boy, be quiet. I could hear movement. The yelping dog was running around my campsite, through it. It was getting further away, and now it was coming back, yelping all the way. Then there was a much larger rush of movement, and the yelping stopped. The RV door opened, and it sounded like the other 2 dogs scampered up the stairs. Lucy, Lucy, the man called. Bad idea number 2. A light slashed through my tent. He must have turned on a flashlight to look for the dog. I could hear him walk down the stairs and start trudging through the undergrowth. Number 3. Eric, come inside. Lucy will be fine. I'm sure she's just exploring, a female voice called out, his wife. Yeah. He trudged up the stairs and the door closed. I released my grip on Tango, and he licked my face again. I couldn't hear anything else moving around. Ignore it. I ignored what I just heard and tried to go back to sleep. It came easier than it should have, and the bliss of slumber washed over me. Morning came fast than it had any right to. I got dressed and took Tango outside. He did his business in the bushes and padded back over to me. I noticed a bit of blood on his front right paw. Oh, bud, what happened there? I knelt down and examined his paw. I could find any cuts or sores. Then I noticed he had some on his back paws too. Then it clicked. I stood up and walked over to the spot where Tango had done his business. It was about 10 yards behind my tent in the undergrowth. A smear of blood covered the ground, blood and white fur. Blood spatter painted the trunks of the lodgepoles surrounding the area. Oh, Lucy, it was still early. The couple in the RV hadn't seemed to have woken up yet. Should I tell them? I would want to know. But the rules say not to talk about it. I decided against it. Whatever this place was, I was getting pretty freaked out by it. Just one more night. I hurried up and packed my day pack. I bundled Tango into the truck, and we lit out for a good 14-mile trail that would keep us busy all day. After a day of beautiful mountain meadows, surreal river views, gorgeous lakes, and 14 miles of walking, Tango and I returned to the campsite. I packed up everything that we wouldn't need for the night into the truck. I noticed the RV at the next site. The couple with the 3 dogs, well, 2 dogs now I guess, was gone. No surprise there. However, the younger gentleman on the other side of me was still here. Dinner was just a dehydrated hiking meal, since all the good food was packed in the truck. I planned to get out of this place as fast as I could in the morning. Sundown started coming and Tango and I got into the tent, locking it behind us. I read a few chapters in my book until it was too dark to make out the words. Sleep came pretty easy tonight, but as is tradition, it didn't last very long. Twig snapping told me someone or something was stumbling around in the underbrush next to my tent. I checked my phone and it was around midnight. At least I slept through the howls tonight. I could make out a couple of voices, the young guys from next door. "Do you see anything?" One of them whispered. "Nah, but it's definitely out there," the other said. My mind raced. These idiots were going to get themselves killed. I zipped open a small window on the side of my tent and looked through the screen. They had flashlights out and were tromping around in the underbrush. They looked like they had their phones out in front of them, as if they were recording something. Then it stepped out of the woods into their light. Whether it was man, beast, or a strange combination of both, it was terrifying. I had never felt such utter, visceral fear. 7 or 8 feet tall, burning red eyes, a body covered in patchy, greasy fur, long claws and a protruding snout, fangs and slobber hanging off it. They froze for a second, and then they ran, back to their tent, diving in. I reached over and grabbed my gun. I had to do something. But by the time I was out of my tent, it had torn into theirs. Blood and viscera flying as it tore into them. Furious. It was odd how silent the savagery was. Maybe I just had auditory exclusion. Who knows? I backed away, careful not to make any more noise. It got back in my tent and locked it. What else could I have done? They were already dead. I pulled Tango close and kept a white knuckle grip on my Glock. I could hear it now, slurping and smacking like it was an 8-year-old having spaghetti at an Olive Garden. Follow the rules. I did my best to sleep that night. When I finally rose, I realized it was daytime. Midday almost. I opened my tent to find a cop car blocking my truck in. A deputy sheriff was talking with another camper, pen and notebook in hand. When I glanced over at the next site, a group of people were loading a body bag into an ambulance. Scanning again, I noticed another deputy walking towards me, stern and grim look on his face. I flashed my badge, and he seemed to relax a bit. "Hey, you hear anything last night?" "Follow the rules." "No, why? What happened?" He gestured towards the body bags. "A couple of campers got ate by a bear, looks like." "You were 50 feet away and you didn't hear anything." "Follow the rules." "No, hard day of hiking and all. We were pretty tired and slept heavy. Sorry." "No worries," he sighed. It gave him my name and contact info, and he let me go. I packed up the tent as quick as I could and squeezed my truck past the cop car. On my way out, I stopped at the host site. I knocked. She answered. "What the fuck is this place?" I blurted out. She smiled. "Someplace ancient, not meant for our kind, but yet here we are. I hope you enjoyed your stay." Then she shut the door in my face. I stared at the closed door. A tap from the window shocked me out of it. From the window of the camper, she mouthed the words, "Follow the rules," to me. So I did. And I left. Tango and I had a wonderful vacation, but the mountains have never felt the same to me since. The feeling of being watched, being followed, it's always there now. I moved not long after to Salt Lake City. I rarely go camping anymore, though Tango and I love our day hikes. I follow the rules, Still to this day, every time I camp, surely that's what she meant. My name is Jake, and I am 23 years old. I recently finished college with a degree in mechanical engineering and an engine machinist major. After looking for 6 months for a job, I was desperate. My wallet was empty. My bank account was empty. And I was scared of asking my parents for money, as they always made me feel worthless. I was so desperate that I stopped looking for cozy office jobs, and I was reviewing everything that I could find. Eventually, I found a job on a cargo ship, and the pay was strangely good. I was to work the night shift in engine maintenance, and I was going to get paid $500 for every 8-hour shift. That is $3,000 every week. I was excited, to say the least. I immediately called the number, and this is the conversation that ensued. Worldwide shipping, how can I help you? Hello, my name is Jake Smith, and I called about the vacant position advertised by this company. The lady's voice changed immediately. Now it seemed almost pitiful. Hello, Mr. Smith. Please send your resume to the company email, and we will contact you to communicate the outcome. I sent my resume, which consisted of my college degree, my major and my linguistic diplomas that stated my ability to speak 5 languages. After one day I received an email that said I would get to have a Skype interview. The interview was normal. I was asked mundane questions about my disponibility to travel and my mental state. The following day I received another email that stated the fact that I got the job. There was a PDF file attached to the email that was titled Job Requirements and Benefits. It had some instructions on what to take with me on the ship, and some orientative instructions about the medical bay, health insurance, and days of leave. I packed my stuff and went to Savannah Harbor to get picked up by the ship. When I got on board, the crew showed me around, took me to my bunk, and gave me the key to my locker. After they left, I started to organize my stuff on the bed, sort what I needed to put in my locker, and what needed to stay in the bathroom. When I opened the locker, there were 2 crosses and a paper inside that said, Rules for the job. These are the rules listed. Rule 1. Never ever enter the engine room between 2011 and 2022. You will not come out. Rule 2. Always have 2 crosses on you at all times. Rule 3. Between 21:36 and 21:42, you will hear a knocking sound from the walls of the engine room. It is imperative that you shut down the engines and close your eyes. You can open them when you hear a booming voice say, until later. If you hear any other voice or any other words, keep your eyes shut and don't move. 4. The engine room is on the lowest level on the ship. If you see a flight of stairs leading below the engines, leave the engine room immediately and hang one of the crosses on the door. Do not open that door until dawn, no matter what you hear. 5. If you see a purple container while you check the exhausts, go back to your bunk and go to sleep while praying. You will still get paid for the shift. 6. If you see a man working on the engines, do whatever he says, no matter what it is, and do not look at his face. Rule 4. Rule 5. Rule 6. At first I was skeptic, thinking that this was an authentic example of sailor humor, but now I am very happy that I stuck with the rules. I got convinced that they are real when I followed Rule 3 and saved my ass from what my co-workers say was a horrible death. All this happened 2 months ago, and I know for sure that I will stay with this company. The pay is too good to pass, and I need the edge. My shift starts in 5 minutes. I will update later and tell you some of the stories that I heard about the ship, and also tell you about my experience with the rules. Until later. Hello, I am happy to be able to write this so early. Last night I saw the purple container, and I was able to go to sleep early. I just woke up and started to write this, knowing that you are impatient. There are so many things that I wasn't able to tell you last night, so I guess I'll start with the ship's story. In my third shift on the ship, I saw the purple container and did what the rules told me to do. The next morning I managed to get lunch with the guys from the day shift, and they were quite nice. I told them what happened in my shifts, and they told me the following story. Mate, this ship is the SS Orang Medan. Ever heard of it? No, sir, I don't think I did. But the name of the boat is SS John Coping, I told him smugly. If you want to survive this ship, you should shut the fuck up and listen. He replied in a very aggressive way. Sorry, sir. He started to tell me about the Orang Medan. The ship sent an eerie SOS signal in Morse code around June 1947, and 2 American vessels by the name of City of Baltimore and the Silver Star received the signal that said, "We float. All officers, including the captain, dead in chart room and on the bridge. Probably whole of crew dead." After some unintelligible Morse code, 2 more words came through. I die. Those motherfuckers in suits said that the crew died due to unsecured, hazardous materials. But I'll tell you what happened. The motherfuckers from CIA were transporting German tech from WW2, and there was a container, more exactly a purple one, which was said to contain different chemicals, but the crew reported strange noises from the container. Before the SOS message was sent, the guys that were responsible with cargo security reported that the container was open, and that there were pentagrams drawn in blood on the walls of the container. They also say that the ship sunk, but we know that this isn't the case. By the time he finished the story, I was scared shitless, thinking about the rules that I found in my locker. But since I was still alive after encountering everything that the rules warned me about, I decided that I will stay and work on the ship. Now that you know what ship I work on, let me tell you my encounters with the locals. The first rule is the most important, and I'll tell you why. You see, I had a co-worker for the night shift, and given that our shift starts at 20 o'clock, I didn't have time to give him the list. The poor bastard entered the engine room at 20:10 and started to check the engine mounts and fuel intake. I ran to the engine room, but I didn't get to him in time. Just as I arrived, I saw through the open door that he was with his back on the engine, searing his skin on the hot metal, and in front of him was this creature. It was 10 feet tall and had spikes from its neck to the tip of its tail. Its mouth was a mess of teeth, some protruding through its skin. The creature was smiling. Its smile was unnaturally large. The head of the thing looked like it was splitting. It looked at me, and its eyes were snake-like, with 2 black slits engulfed in dark red. I almost pissed myself. It bit my co-worker on the torso and smashed his body on everything that it could find. I closed the door and started crying, my co-worker's screams breaking the quietness of the night, only to get deathly quiet once again. I couldn't sleep that day. I called my superior and told him about what happened, and he told me to open the door and do my job. He was a douche. I opened the door expecting a gory mess, but to my surprise, the room was normal. No blood, no flesh, no sign of my co-worker, and the room was smelling like rotten eggs. It was unsettlingly normal. That week was the worst one of my life. I cried myself to sleep every day that week. The second rule is pretty self-explanatory. Just have 2 crosses with you at all times. One in case you see the stairs in the engine room, but the other has eerie reasoning. You see, there is a creepy little girl that follows you around when you do your shifts. She is mostly harmless, but if you don't have your cross on you, she will charge at you. She won't kill or hurt you, but you will fall asleep and dream the most horrific dreams about your family, about your friends, about your pets, and about yourself. When you wake up, you will be on the floor in the engine room. God help you if you wake up at 2011. On a happier note, I am very proud to announce that I have a ghost friend. When the Orang Medan sunk, there was a dog on board, and apparently he is a ghost now. He is a very happy fella, and besides the fact that his eyes are pure white, radiating light, and his body is like Vanta black, I love him dearly. His name is Max, and he has saved my ass 2 times already. The little girl is afraid of him, and he seems to change his eyes in a bright shade of red when the container appears. I really wish that all the ghosts were like Max, but sadly that is not the case. That is all the time I have now. The idiots from the day shift don't know how an engine works, and they asked for my help. I will tell you my other stories at a later time. Until later. Hello, you impatient bunch. I have so much to tell you since the last time I updated. I will start in order with how the rules go so you can keep an idea of the life I live on this ship. Bearing that in mind, I will tell you my experience with the 3rd rule. After hearing what the dude from the day shift said about the ship, I started to do a bit of research about our creepy Orang Medan, and I've come with a lot of information. Firstly, there are anonymous reports saying that the time in which the crew died is between 2136 and 2142, and that the thing from the container bound their souls in the walls of the engine room, and the things that I hear are remnants, reoccurring manifestations of souls that are trapped between the afterlife and the overworld, of the actions performed that day. So that is that basically a scratch CD that replays itself until the end of time. This information was not satisfying for me, as it didn't explain the need for quietness, and for me not to see what is happening, until the voice spoke the words. I dug deeper so I could understand what I am facing, and this is what I found. Apparently, the cycle in which the souls are put can be broken by an event that didn't occur in the time of their death. That is the engine sound, me talking, me moving, etc. So I know that. The next thing on the list is the booming voice that says "until later." And to my surprise, I found out that it is the voice of the demon thing from the container that is leaving the ship by a portal to hell. I didn't find an explanation for the other voices, and my most likely guess is a rupture through the fabric of our dimension caused by the gigantic quantity of power required to bound souls to iron, which is basically poison for demons, as it is considered a sort of good holy metal, so even more power, and open a portal, but I am not sure. As for not seeing what is producing the sound, I think the reasoning is to not let the demon see you. It's that kind of, if you see it, it sees you, kind of bullshit. But I am not about to risk my life for a hunch. I find the reasoning for the 4th rule, but again I have a guess that the stairs are the portal that the demon opened, but I don't know why it is not in sync with the knocking, and I really don't want to find out. Now that the creepy demon shit is out of the way, let me tell you about how my dear Max saved my ass, and now it's 3 times. In my 10th shift, I was already accustomed to Max, and started to look after my little ghost. Friendly demon. Friend. Every time we stopped in a harbour, I would buy some dog food and dried meat from the local markets, and give him some at the beginning of every shift. I think that for my actions he started to have a liking for me too, and would watch my back while in the engine room and while I was checking the exhausts. The first time he saved my ass was when I forgot to take my 2nd cross for the 2nd time. The first time I found out what happens without it. I usually keep the cross for my protection in my back pocket and the one for the door in my tool belt. But I guess that on that day I fell asleep in my work clothes and it somehow fell out of my pocket. I don't know. Anyway, I was leaving my bunk for the shift and I didn't notice. I went out and I only realized that something was off when I got to the engine room. The air was heavier and tasted metallic, like blood. I heard giggling behind me and I saw the little girl charging me. I screamed like a sheep, kind of funny now that I think about it. And my little guy jumped from my shadow and barked the most hideous sound I ever heard. It was on multiple voices and almost burst my eardrums. The little girl hissed and ran away. He then escorted me to my bunk, where I found my cross. The second time he saved me was when I was checking the exhausts and was so concentrated that I didn't realize the container appeared. Max barked at me, and I looked at him in a curious way. He turned his back to me and looked at the front of the ship. When I looked, there was the container. I saw its door slowly opening, and I ran whilst praying. When I got to my bunk, Max settled at my feet. I fell asleep really hard as I was in shock, but I can't deny it. My little ghost saved my ass once again from what I imagine was an eternity, trapped in a wall, scaring the living crap of the guy that would replace me. The third time he saved my ass was yesterday, when I was helping the guy to fix the engine, and I nearly looked at his face. A split second before seeing his face, Max tackled me to the ground, his body absorbing every photon from around my eyes. I remember saying, "Damn, he's fast. Good thing he's my buddy," before returning to my task of giving him the eyes and fingers he asked for. Yes, he is fixing the engine with human parts. I will tell you more about it tomorrow. Now I gotta go. Our ship is stationed in tropical waters for the next week, and I convinced the captain that we all deserve a day to relax. In 30 minutes, we are going to the beach to relieve some of the tension, and I will enjoy every second of being normal, even if it is only for one day. So I have a lot to tell you, and I will start with what happened at the beach. After I left the ship, I saw Max's eyes in the shadows. I didn't think much of it because my little buddy often followed me when the ship was stationed. The day at the beach was uneventful, just some sailors with some beers and joints. The night was full, to say the least. After sunset, the guys went back to the ship, but I went into the bar to get wasted as a normal person would do on such occasion. I met a girl there and she was stunning. Imagine every man's dream, combined into a single body. And she was smart, hella smart. We started to hit it off. After an hour of talking to her, she asked the question. That question that makes a man know that it is the time to use that dusty old condom in his wallet. Do you want to get out of here? At that time, my other head was thinking, and I accepted. We made out all the way inside the forest, and somehow I didn't realize that she started changing. Her eyes were yellow, then she had wings. Then I saw her mouth, and as soon as I realized that she had way too many teeth, I tried to nope it out. She was fast, inhumanly fast, and caught up to me soon after I took off running. It tackled me, and I punched her in the temple. Its face didn't even flinch. Soon after I registered the pain and looked at my palm that was badly broken. My palm looked like a piece of uncooked steak, just hanging there only held by my muscles. I screamed like a little girl and pushed it off of me with my legs. I knew that I wouldn't run far away, but I still tried. After running for 10 meters, I looked behind and saw that it was nearly touching me. I blinked and it was gone. I felt compelled to stop, like I was somehow controlled, and when I did, I could hear two things: high-pitched shrieks and low guttural growls. After letting out a silent, "What the fuck?" my buddy Max walked out from a bush, blood dripping from his mouth, that now had a lot more teeth. Then I heard multiple voices that were talking as one, but not with my ears. I heard them in my head. Jake, I won't hurt you, but fuck. You deserve it. I never seen someone so stupid. I let out a confused Max. Then the voices came again. You know me as Max, but my name is Braille. Being a bit more confident and relaxed, I said, Braille is a little hard to pronounce. Can I still call you Max? As you wish. Put your hand in my mouth. Oh God. Max seemed a bit annoyed. He doesn't have any business with me. Now put your hand in my mouth. I did as he asked, knowing that I was royally fucked. He bit my hand so hard that it broke away from my forearm. I screamed in pain and took a look at what I assumed it will be a stump, but I was amazed to find out that my broken hand was now intact. Even the scar I had from cutting my hand in a bandsaw was gone. My hand was now good as new, except for the burn mark inside of my palm in form of a flame. What the fuck was that? I asked Max Braille. In a spooked way, a sphinx. I hate those assholes. What did it want with me? It wanted to eat you. I was spooked and kind of afraid of Max, but I started to head to the ship for a good night's rest. While walking, I asked Max, Why do you help me? He responded, Because I'm lonely. Every human either hates me, either fears me. You are the only one that didn't look at me with fear or hatred. That saddened me, but hey, life, death, is a bitch. The next morning I looked up Braille on Google. I am friends with a hellhound. I guess that is good. I am friend with a demon dog. Now that you know my wild night, let me tell you about Rule 4. The stairs are a portal to hell. The portal that the thing from the container used to go back home, and I guess that the rip between worlds remained, and it is now used by other demons to fuck with us humans. I asked Max about it, but he said it is better for me to not know and just stick to the rule. I am not about to press my curiosity on a hellhound, so I guess that is how it will stay. The demon that used the voice of my mum is a mimic demon, and they are scary assholes. They can turn into anything they want, Max, and mimic voices. I really hope I don't hear that asshole again. I won't bother to explain Rule 5, as you know from the last post what it is. I have just a bit of new info about it. I asked Max about the container, and he only said, He is my last owner, Olivier. I googled Olivier, and apparently he is the demon of cruelty, so someone I don't want to meet. I didn't ask Max more about it, as he seemed really sad. This is all for now. I have to find out what the burn from my hand means. I think it is some kind of protection, because last night I closed the door on my hand, and the door bent. So I guess that is cool, but I hope it doesn't mean that I sold my soul. I will post more this week, after I find out what the fuck is a sphinx, and why the fuck one wanted to eat me. If you like the story, please leave a subscription. Comment what video you would like to see next and share the video. It means a lot to me. We'll hear from each other soon.